The Saturn return is a big point in someone's life. It comes around every 27 to 29 years, and we're going to talk about what it means for you today on my channel. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Mina, your favorite Pisces astrologer, back with an educational video where we're going to talk about the importance, the significance of experiencing a Saturn return. And I love how in pop culture we're talking about this finally. I love it when people with huge celebrity platforms talk about astrology. It's just so great to see that astrology is getting more traction nowadays. And speaking of that, Ariana Grande, and I wasn't even a fan of her music originally, but I really love the Eternal Sunshine album. I think every Cancer and Neptune person loves it. Thank you, Ariana, so much. But she really shouts out astrology because she has a Saturn return track. She herself, Ariana, is going through her Saturn return, and she even briefly mentions it on the album. So thank you, Ariana. We're going to talk about it today. So we're going to talk about what Saturn means, what your Saturn means per the house it's in, and how your Saturn return is going to show up, and what you can do to make sure that you have a really abundant Saturn return instead of a pure scary one, because they can be scary. So we're going to talk about all of that. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to my channel. You're helping my dream come true, and I'm a Pisces. I love dreams. I will never forget it. I will appreciate it forever. What does Saturn mean? Well, in Roman mythology, Saturn was called Kronos, the god of time. So it means time, history, wealth, dissolution, which we'll come back to that later, and fear. So with dissolution, another way to say that is debauchery. Another way to say that is decomposition. And a lot of older astrology texts linked Saturn, just like with Pluto, to death itself. So regardless, it's a really heavy, stern, oppressive energy to have in a planet, and depending on what house it's in, it can be a really difficult Saturn return for you. Yet there's always a rainbow at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get to the good stuff, you guys. First house Saturn return. If this is you, if your Saturn is in the first house, this is quite hard, because Saturn in the first house is very similar to Saturn in Aries, which is in detriment. It's not an easy Saturn to have. It's a Saturn that grows up way too fast, gets serious way too fast. So imagine a child who really can understand deep, cold, harsh truths of life at such a young age. That happens, but the emotional development is really not at a stage to handle those harsh truths appropriately. So in growing up so fast, there's a lot of internal damage that can happen if you have a Saturn in the first house. You can really be emotionally stunted because you had to grow up so fast. You didn't trust the adults around you to be in control, so you had to be the boss real quick. So a lot of this Saturn return involves distrust of authority, maybe being an oppressive, pressurizing boss yourself that stresses people out to get outcomes. And also someone, because the first house is very outward and physical, this is someone who can really fear, because Saturn is about fear aging and fear getting older. And that's why they rush themselves through life, because they don't want to miss a second. They don't want to miss any opportunity. So they're just stressed unbelievably all the time. So with a Saturn return like this, there's a couple of themes that are going to come up. First of all, is all your stress rational? Is it appropriate for the situation? Because otherwise, it's just slowly killing you, because your cortisol levels are probably through the roof. You can't relax. That's not a good state of mind to live in if you want a long Saturn-style life. So yeah, how are you dealing with stress? Is your stress even reasonable for the situations? How can you lower it? Any methods that you can use to lower that stress, whether it's morning yoga, whether it's speaking with a therapist to kind of become more emotionally mature. So dealing with past traumas to really fill in those maturity gaps, so your emotional maturity can catch up with your life check boxes, your accomplishments in life maturity. So yeah, it's all about playing catch up with the first house Saturn return. And also, are you treating your body correctly? Are you investing in your physical appearance? Can you let go of the fear of aging? Because a lot of times people with Saturn in the first house are just beautiful. They have that great Saturn bone structure. You guys age like fine wine. We just got to get your stress down. And also, are you being an effective leader? Because you're going to be quite bossy with this placement. You could just be stressing people out. And yes, you get outcomes, but you end up destroying relationships. And that's not really an effective leader all the time. So, really evaluating your leadership and if it's good for your physical and mental health, and whether it's good for the people around you, because this Saturn can be a little selfish because it's in the first most selfish house in the chart. So, yeah, what type of boss do you want to be? How can we lower those stress levels? Can you accept the fear of aging? Point all your behaviors like arrows towards that direction so you can head in a great direction and you can actually let loose and kind of enjoy life like you didn't get to maybe when you were a kid. All right, second house Saturn return. The second house is about finances and hedonistic style pleasures food, sex, touch, all the senses. So with a Saturn here, there could be a really big fear of poverty. Maybe you grew up in a lot of poverty, and you want to work so hard to not be in that position yourself when you grow up. So when you're a little kid, you're already thinking about like, how can I not be broke? And because of all that mental energy being spent on that, it could be really hard for you to enjoy things. And a lot of that is because maybe when you were growing up, there wasn't enough money or resources to like go to the movies or do those little simple second house Taurus-y things. This can also be someone really dissatisfied with the appearance of their physical body. So what can we do about this with the Saturn return? Well, first of all, we have to evaluate what is currently your relationship with money. Are your spending habits really pointing towards where you want to land in terms of amassing wealth? So are you just working a lot and making a lot of money, but you're spending it too quick to actually save? Those are things that you can address. Also, are you allowing yourself to really take pleasure in things, to really enjoy the moment, to enjoy life's simple pleasures because you might be able to afford to now? Or are you still stuck in that scarcity fear mindset that poverty can put most of us in? Also, are you really loving your physical body? Are you really polishing it? Are you treating it well? Are you trying to gain self-esteem in this area? It's really important to love your body and to do whatever you can to appreciate it with a Saturn in the second house return. I think Saturn always has it a little bit easy when it's in an earthy house, the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th, because Saturn rules Capricorn and it's an earth sign. So it's not so bad here yet. Saturn returns are always challenging. Saturn return in the 3rd house. So this one can be a little difficult because it deals with our mind, our thoughts, how we communicate, how we socialize with people, and especially within our close-knit communities, our neighborhood, our school, our siblings. A lot of this Saturn return, this might be someone who just runs their mouth without really assessing the quality of what comes out. Or they could be so terrified and shy that they just shut up because they don't want to say the wrong thing. Either thing can kind of be true. So there is an element of feeling like your voice matters too much, like the words that you say matter too much, or they matter nothing at all. Very black and white with a Saturn in the 3rd house return. So how can we deal with how you relate to your community, your siblings, because you might measure yourself against your siblings with a Saturn in the 3rd house, and it can turn into a toxic competition that really kills your self-esteem. How can we deal with all these themes? Well, a lot of the Saturn return really involves learning when to shut up. Learning when to shut up and learning when to speak, and really judging, because Saturn is really discriminating energy, really assessing the quality of what does come out of your mouth. And again, when to shut up, when to not say anything at all. And really seeing that your voice is powerful, even annoyingly so. Like when you talk, people listen. And that's why you have to really be careful about what comes out of your mouth with a Saturn in the third house return. Also, reevaluating again, how can you get out of a toxic competition with your siblings? How can you feel like you're enough? How can you feel like, actually, a lot of this Saturn return might involve feeling like really mentally out of control. You could struggle with mental health, maybe negative cyclical thoughts. So, how can you really get control of those thoughts? How can you sit with those negative thoughts and transmute them into something positive and useful? And the fourth house, this one's our second angular house. The first was the first house. This can be really hard because the fourth house is about our childhood and our private life, like in our home with the doors shut. So when you have Saturn here and you're experiencing a Saturn return, a lot of childhood trauma can come up that you need to deal with. So Saturn's going to be like, hey, did you deal with these ugly parts of your childhood? Are they holding you back? Are you living in the past? Are you working on letting it go and taking the good parts? So with Saturn here, it's very similar to first house Saturn, yet a little different. So similar themes of maybe feeling like you couldn't be a child when you were a child, especially emotionally, like you could not emote. Maybe you got punished for being openly emotional and your parental figures expected you to be like adult levels mature at home. No crying, no emoting. You had to be very stoic with the fourth house Saturn. And you might have even had to take care of younger siblings. You had a lot of responsibility at home, possibly. And of course, this could make someone very bitter that the most precious part of their life was so oppressive and not emotionally safe. So this individual can really struggle in their intimate, close bonds, their familial bonds, and even relationships in terms of emotionally opening up because they were not able to trust that process when they were young. Times with the fourth house Saturn return, you could have been a child that was overly punished. Like the punishment did not fit the crime, it was exaggerated. And this can be really harmful, sitting with that as you grow up. There could be a lot of resentment. So a part of this Saturn return is unlearning a lot of bad behaviors when it comes to being openly emotional in your close relationships. And really, I don't want to say the word forgive because I think that can be very dismissive, but learning to live with the trauma that happened to you as a child and not letting that rob you of a special happy life, especially when it comes to being emotionally safe. And how can you deal with this? Therapy isn't a bad option. A therapist can really give you a safe space to explore that childhood trauma and give you techniques on how to test people in terms of, how can you test someone in your close circle to see if they're safe to open up with? Because you really have to be judgy with this Saturn to really truly assess who is safe to emotionally open up with. And also learning to be at peace with what happened to you as a child so it doesn't make you bitter, because the fourth house is about roots, so you don't want to poison your soil by holding on to these things that really prohibit you from building a happy, emotionally safe future. And I know that not everyone chooses to deal with a fourth house Saturn return this way, but a lot of healing might come from simply starting your own family, getting married and having kids, and you set the culture. You create that warm, beautiful, safe, emotional environment for your children and family. I love it when I see a fourth house Saturn return person making their own family and making beautiful memories. I think it's so healing. All right, fifth house Saturn return. This is a tough one because the fifth house is all about your creative talents, your sense of self-expression, your individuality, what makes you you. So when Saturn's here, it means that something is stunted in your self-development. And this can manifest in a couple of ways because it all has to do with confidence. This can be a child that has no confidence, so shy, so fearful of expressing themselves. And maybe they're not even given the chance to play or indulge in the hobbies they want to really express their creativity in. Like their parental figures are just not fostering that. Or it could be someone who is very spoiled and entitled and used to getting their way, thus creating a very overly confident, maybe even slightly narcissistic individual. So when you have a fifth house Saturn return, Saturn's going to want you to straighten up your sense of self expression, to have a healthy amount of confidence, to have a healthy ego. So, not zero confidence, but not too much. Not an invisible ego, but not an overly exasperated ego. So, this is all about getting to know yourself. And also, if you weren't able to as a kid, now that you're an adult, express your hobbies. Try to express that creativity. Give yourself the opportunity that other people didn't give you when you were a kid. Indulge in hobbies, all that stuff. Take that dance class, take that fencing class. Do these things with a fifth house Saturn return because it's very healing. And also take a very realistic assessment of your ego, your confidence. Is it too much? Is it too little? And how can you fix that? How can you fall in love? Because the fifth house is very romantic. How can you fall in love with yourself in the best of ways? Right, for my sixth house Saturn return people, look, I'm drinking my pomegranate juice. I love this stuff. It's a lot to do with your physical health. So someone with a sixth house Saturn could have lived in fear of illness, like physical illness. They might have been around a parent who was sick. Something caused them to have a lot of fear of disease and illness. And Saturn returning to your sixth house is really checking, like, hey, are you really cultivating a strong sense of physical health? Are you listening to your doctor's recommendations? Are you having a healthy diet per your situation? Are all your behaviors pointing towards the physical health that you really, really need? Are you smoking 2 packs of cigarettes? Because that's not very good for your sixth house Saturn return. And also coming to terms with, hey, you might feel very unlucky that you've had a lot of physical ailments to deal with, period. And really coming to peace with that, which I know is easier said than done. And again, taking charge of your physical health, creating the physical health that you want to be there is so healing with the sixth house Saturn return. I know this one's so hard though. Wish I can give you all hugs. Take care of your body. Your body's your temple. Seventh house Saturn return. This one's interesting because it's almost exalted because a Libra Saturn is the best Saturn to have. And the seventh house is associated with Libra. It's the house of relationships. So these people are so endearing. I think that they really get serious too quick with relationships. Like they want to get married really quick or get into a very serious relationship very quick, probably before they're emotionally ready. And I think that they must have seen through their parents growing up how important partner selection was, that is a big piece of someone's happiness, is selecting the right partner. So they just want to get ahead of the game and start choosing early. So there's a lot of painful lessons, unfortunately, that can be learned with a seventh house Saturn. And with your Saturn return coming back into the seventh house, Saturn's checking like, hey, have you really understood how to properly integrate into a partnership? Are you accurately judging the partners you're getting with? And most importantly, can you really sit with your relationship mistakes and learn from those mistakes? Not punish yourself. Saturny people always punish themselves. Instead of punishing yourself, just taking the lessons and improving. So that's what this return is about. It's about really Saturn wanting to see an improvement in your mate selection, and that you really are learning from your previous situations, and that you are a good partner yourself. And that might be something that you might have to take a really hard look at with a seventh house Saturn. I really do think with these people that they get better with each relationship. So that's a good thing. Eighth house Saturn return. This is really, I think, the darkest Saturn to have. The eighth house is about our deepest secrets and secrets that we're conscious of, that we want to keep hidden. It's about sex. It's about other people's money and debt. So when you have Saturn here, you could have been a child who was financially abused. Like maybe someone took out loans in your name, ruined your credit before you were even an adult. There can be a lot of mistrust in terms of money with a eighth house Saturn. And sadly, I don't want this to be true, but a lot of astrologers think that a eighth house Saturn has to do with experiencing sexual trauma, SA. And if you have, I'm so sorry you went through that. Um, so having a lot of mistrust with sex in general, and even being betrayed by having someone leak your secrets, having someone that you really trusted prove to be an enemy. An eighth house Saturn return could involve psychological abuse as well, or abuse in any form, really. So it's really important when you have an eighth house Saturn return to remind yourself that you're not that helpless child anymore, and you're a badass and you can protect yourself from predators. And to really sit in that power and cultivate that power so you really can protect yourself, because you deserve protection after having a eighth house Saturn. And Saturn's return is going to keep checking, like, how strong is your protection? Are you really protecting yourself from predatory people? I think with this Saturn return, it's probably the hardest one to heal because it's heavy subject material. It's, of course, again, probably selecting a therapist and really unpacking possible sexual trauma and having a healthy relationship with sex. Even if you didn't get SA'd, how can you have a healthier relationship with sex? You could overdo it, you could not do it enough with a Saturn in the eighth house. So really balancing your relationship with sex, having a healthy one, and also learning how to trust other people. I know that sounds so simple, but when your trust is so intimately violated, like it often is with a Saturn in the eighth house, the return is going to be around trusting other people again. And I think that's such a hard thing to ask an eighth house Saturn to do. And also, coming to terms with maybe when you were young, you weren't financially able to rely on other people. And it's really hard, even as a young adult, to not have that safety net within family and friends. So, really coming to terms with that and learning to trust other people when they let you borrow money, and maybe learning what's good debt versus bad debt, because there can be bad financial habits ingrained in the individual, just like with the second house Saturn return. So, all of these are themes, and I just want to extra wish my eighth house Saturn return people the best of luck, because this is so hard. And it's valid that it's hard for you. It's very real. Ninth house Saturn, this one can be a very big downer because the ninth house is the happiest part in our chart. It's really where we want to expand, it's where we want to be abundant, it's where we want to feel free. It is the house of happiness. And when you have Saturn there, your return, this person could deal with depression. And again, I'm not a therapist, just an astrologer. Really can struggle to find happiness and find meaning and purpose in their life. They could have been surrounded by a lot of liars in their youth. So their relationship with the truth is tainted. They can always be in fear of being lied to. Your relationship with God and spirit, especially in an organized sense, can be damaged here. You could have really been abused or let down by religious institutions with a Saturn in the ninth house. So when your return comes, a lot of the Saturn return in the ninth house is about really finding your happiness. And a lot of times with Saturn in the ninth house, this involves moving away, because it is the house of long distance travel, to really find yourself and to find what makes your life meaningful, and to really give yourself a permission slip to be happy. A lot of people with ninth house Saturns never felt like they were allowed or deserved to be happy. So Mina is here to say you do deserve to be happy, and that you can definitely take steps towards that. And really having a healthy relationship with organized religion. Not saying you have to trust it again, but at least to cleanse yourself of those negative feelings you might have that aren't currently serving you. no matter where you land, whether you're agnostic, atheist, or free, kind of your own thing, to really just come to acceptance in terms of your relationship with religion is really important here for a ninth house Saturn return. And also, there could be learning struggles, learning disabilities associated with the ninth house Saturn because it is the house of higher learning. Um, a lot of this return is accepting and acknowledging yourself as an intelligent person, really validating that intellect that you do have, and accepting that your brain might just learn things a little bit differently or take more time to learn things. Now let's get to the 10th house Saturn return. This one is an Earth house, so I think it's easier. It is probably the best Saturn return to have because it's in the 10th house associated with Capricorn. Hello, Capricorn's ruling planet is Saturn, so there's a lot of good vibes here, very easy flow of energy. And a lot of the 10th house involves career, reputation, and also after 30. So it's really like you're coming into maturity at the really perfect time. Like you're not stunted, you're maturing at a very healthy rate. I would say that you're naturally hardworking, ambitious, want to be the boss of wherever you work. I think that the challenge here, even though it's the best Saturn return to have, the best natal Saturn to have probably, is maybe work-life balance. Are you working way too much? Are you close with people who accept that part of you? And also, what type of boss are you? Are you actually a good boss? And are you actually sticking with the goal and excelling at it instead of just being spread too thin? Are you really taking time to sit with your accomplishments? Are you just speeding to the next goal? Really celebrate your accomplishments with a 10th house Saturn return. And this might be about changing your career when Saturn returns to the 10th house, like embracing the possibility of a big shift and not feeling like everything you've built is failing because you're just going to get back on that mountain and keep climbing because you're workaholics and God love you. 11th house Saturn return. It's also technically a Saturn influenced house because it's linked to Aquarius. Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, yet I don't think this Saturn return is so easy. With a natal Saturn in the 11th house, you could have felt really socially alienated, really lonely, like you didn't have an easy time making friends or integrating into a group. So you were just a loner and socially awkward instead. Or you could have been overly bossy because Saturn needs to be in charge and really push people away that could have been a good friend. So with the return, it's really about 11th house Saturn return is about assessing accurately your ability to form friendships and to have healthy, long-lasting friendships. Are your behaviors pointing towards that goal? If they're not, it's time to adjust so you can actually develop a social life. And I want to say with this Saturn in the 11th house, you could have been bullied when you were young, or you could have become the bully after being bullied. I think it's important either way this falls to forgive yourself and to become the friend that you wish you would have had, or you wish you could have been to someone instead of being a bully. So yeah, there's tons of hope with this Saturn return, and all you got to do is really accurately assess how you are in friendships and maybe even recognizing that friendships are important to you, and it's okay that they're important to you. It doesn't make you weak. 12th house Saturn return. This one's special. Saturn here is like romantic Saturn. But anyway, it's not so easy. When you have Saturn in the 12th house of Pisces, it's linked to Pisces. It's all about unconscious spiritual things. It's distorted, it's daydreaming. It's the house of self-undoing, I hate saying that, and the house of self-imprisonment. So naturally, Saturn here is going to be difficult. And it could be someone who feels very far away from God, just like Saturn in the 9th house. You could feel like your prayers aren't answered, that there's not a force beyond you actually protecting you. It could also be someone who feels lost in their daydreams. Like it's hard to focus, it's hard to feel anchored and sure of what you're supposed to do and accomplish in this life. This is also someone, this is a little woo-woo, that can experience a lot of paranormal things around them, and they just aren't confident in their ability to be believed, so they keep all of this inside. This is a very silent Saturn. This is also a Saturn that really likes to save other people. It's very altruistic. It's like you're the spiritual daddies of the zodiac. Saturn in the 12th house. You can have a very big altruistic pull towards helping people who are not fortunate. So part of this return is to ask yourself, are your behaviors pointing to self-destruction? Are they really undoing yourself? Or are they building security, which is very stabilizing and can help you not feel so lost? So are you your own worst enemy? This is the question you need to ask with a 12th house Saturn return. And really, again, coming to peace with your relationship to God and spirituality, no matter where you fall, just being at peace with it. So you can really cleanse yourself of that negative energy, and maybe even using your psychic or paranormal visions to help other people, to validate other people where you didn't feel so validated and believed, can be a big part of this. And also making sure your altruistic behaviors are going to people that deserve it. And also make sure you're not purposely being the martyr with this 12th house Saturn. So Saturn might check you in its return, like, hey, are you still martyring yourself? Are you still sacrificing yourself for no reason? All right, so this is my video. I hope you guys loved it, and I hope you feel comfortable enough to leave your experiences about your Saturn return in the comments, especially if this is your second Saturn return. It's such a gift to hear from you guys. I love hearing about people's second Saturn return. So yeah, let it all out in the comments. Let me know if you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.